Welcome back. For today's Business Matters, we have Don Ma here with us. Don, good to see you. What's happening in the world of business today?
Yeah, good to see you as well. So let me get started right away on that. And starting with Berkshire Hathaway, has shed more shares in Bank of America. In the latest round of selling, Warren Buffett's company made more than $860 million in profit. Since July, the conglomerate had unloaded nearly 220 million shares in the country's second largest bank. So neither Buffett nor Berkshire have shared any insight into the sudden and sharp sell-off, but Berkshire continues to be Bank of America's largest stockholder, has more than 800 million shares that have an estimated value of north of $32 million. Meanwhile, Southwest Airlines service to and from Atlanta will be reduced starting next year. So the pilots union said the number of gates would be cut down beginning in April, and the flight attendants union said no jobs will be lost, but flight attendants will be asked to relocate. A memo seen by CNN indicated that, CNBC rather, indicated that more than 300 jobs between flight attendants and pilots could be cut. Southwest released an expanded schedule that shows the cuts in Atlanta will be countered with more service in Nashville and new overnight flights to Hawaii. And about 2,000 workers have gone on strike at Hawaii's largest resort. They join hotel workers who are striking across the U.S. Unionized workers at Hilton Hawaiian Village Waikiki Beach Resort are calling for higher wages, more manageable workloads, and a reversal of COVID-era cuts. It's Hilton's largest hotel. Guests woke up yesterday morning to the sound of striking workers beating drums, whistling as well, and chanting. The unions are saying that more than 4,000 hotel workers in total are now on strike at Hilton, Hyatt, and Marriott hotels in several cities. The hotel strike comes as more than 600 nurses remain locked out of a hospital in Honolulu after going on a one-day strike earlier this month. Now, workers for Boeing say that they felt pressured to focus on production speed over quality. That summary comes from a special investigation published Wednesday by the FAA, made public by a Senate subcommittee. In the report, employees are saying that they didn't feel trained enough to do their jobs. Boeing has been facing multiple investigations since a door plug blew off a 737 MAX flight in midair back in January. And the FAA administrator, Mike Whitaker, testified in June that the agency had taken a, quote, too hands-off approach to regulating Boeing. In a testimony to a House committee yesterday, Whitaker said the company has made strides on its production line, but he also said much work remains in repairing Boeing's safety culture. In response to the new report, Boeing says the company has taken key steps to create a safety culture that encourages employees to share their voice. Boeing also says that it's also going to continue to put into action a comprehensive plan to improve in several areas under the FAA's oversight. Now, former cryptocurrency executive Caroline Ellison was sentenced yesterday to 2 years in prison for her role in the fraud that occurred at the FTX crypto exchange, which was founded by her former boyfriend, Sam Bankman-Fried. The sentence comes even as the judge recognized her extensive cooperation with prosecutors. Take a look.
The ex-girlfriend of former FTX head Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 2 years in prison Tuesday. Caroline Ellison was a top executive at the cryptocurrency exchange. Prosecutors have called its collapse one of the biggest financial frauds in U.S. history. Bankman-Fried was behind the $8 billion theft of customer funds from FTX, which he founded. The judge noted Ellison's cooperation with prosecutors in convicting Bankman-Fried last year. However, the judge said he was not comfortable with remorse and cooperation being a get-out-of-jail-free card in a case so serious. Bankman-Fried rode a boom in cryptocurrency prices during the COVID pandemic to a net worth of, according to Forbes magazine, $26 billion by October 2021. Ellison ran Alameda Research, a cryptocurrency-focused hedge fund also founded by Bankman-Fried from 2021 to 2022. His wealth evaporated when FTX collapsed in November 2022 after a flurry of customer withdrawals. Bankman-Fried was charged a month later with stealing FTX customer funds to plug losses at Alameda. Ellison testified at his trial he directed her and others to take money from FTX's customers without their knowledge. Later, she pleaded guilty to 7 felony counts of fraud and conspiracy, crimes which carry a maximum sentence of 110 years in prison. In handing down her 2-year sentence, U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan said Ellison's remarkable cooperation was a fundamental distinction between her and Bankman-Fried. She'd met with prosecutors about 20 times to help piece together FTX's unraveling and make their case against him. Earlier in the hearing, she said, "Not a day goes by when I don't think about all the people I hurt," and that she'd thought about leaving Alameda several times before telling the judge, "I'm sorry, I wasn't brave."
And the federal government has been repurposing old nuclear power plants into solar power plants. The Department of Energy has now chosen a second site in New Mexico for this purpose. Let's now go to NTD's Sean Marshall for the story.
The U.S. Department of Energy publicly announced that Carlsbad, New Mexico will be the second site at which an old nuclear power plant will be turned into a solar power plant. It's part of the government's Clean Up to Clean Energy initiative. They've selected NextEra Energy Resources Development, LLC, to enter negotiations for a carbon pollution-free electricity generation project. The project is to produce a minimum of 150 megawatts of solar energy along with a 100 megawatt storage system.
It's kind of a natural fit anyways to put wind and solar, because that's what you need. Is you need a lot of land and you need transmission infrastructure. Those are the 2 choke points for them.
The site to be used is the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. It's the nation's only repository for the disposal of the nuclear waste generated by atomic energy defense activities. Bennett mentions how the country is essentially stuck in a repurposing position.
The only thing that we can build nowadays because of the federal subsidies is wind and solar, and nuclear has been regulated almost out of existence. So here we are with this dichotomy of replacing a 24/7 power source with an intermittent power source on the same site.
The first planned plant restructuring started with Hecate Energy. They're working on a 1 gigawatt solar facility at Hanford, a former U.S. nuclear weapons manufacturing site in Washington state.
It makes sense as well because often that land around nuclear power plants are not utilized for other things. They aren't farmed. They're a good place to put solar versus cutting down forests or putting them on prime agricultural land.
The future solar Hanford site was a top-secret location for the Manhattan Project during World War II, where nuclear reactors produced plutonium for the world's first atomic bombs. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Vice President Kamala Harris is raising and spending considerably more than former President Donald Trump in the battle for the White House. Their advertising strategies also differ quite notably. Here's the story.
The election, a little over a month away, and Vice President Kamala Harris has raised significantly more money than former President Trump, over $1 billion, almost double Trump's $640 million, according to Open Secrets. And Harris has spent far more, over $700 million. Trump has spent $460 million. Public records show the majority of the money is going to ads.
I intend to be a president for all Americans.
Both spending heavily on TV and online ads, such as this.
And we can chart a new way forward.
And this.
Are they better off now than they were 3 years ago?
I grew up a middle-class kid.
Records show Trump is spending heavily on mail ads, while Harris isn't. In the last month, the Harris campaign has booked over $330 million in TV ads, while Trump has booked $200 million. The Trump campaign says it doesn't spend as much because voters voluntarily consume content about him.
Meanwhile, global debt climbed to a record high of $312 trillion at the end of the second quarter. And this is based on data from the Institute of International Finance, which is a banking trade group. So the IIF said the rise was driven by borrowing in the US and China as well. The group forecasts global government borrowing to rise drastically from a current $92 trillion to $145 trillion by the end of the decade. Now, a big chunk of the projected spike was driven by energy transition costs due to climate concerns, and the report revealed that increased debt in India, Russia, and Sweden as well, while Japan and other European countries saw a notable decline. So global group OECD has slightly raised its world economic growth forecast for the year as central bank rate hikes lose their impact and inflation eases. Household incomes are getting a boost. Here are the details on that.
We have a picture of growth, of resilient growth. Inflation is coming down, trade is doing better, and we know that labor markets are easing.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development now projects the world economy to grow 3.2% both this year and next year. This is a nudge up for this year and unchanged for next.
We still think that growth can still do better. In order to do better, we need to revive investment, and we need to make sure that we have good policies. In terms of policy, we think that monetary policy should there's room to lower rates, but there's room also. It's important to stay prudent.
In its Outlook update, the OECD said that interest rate cuts would boost spending going forward, while consumer spending has benefited from lower inflation.
We can see that consumption is doing fairly well in the UK. And inflation continues to go down, and we continue to think that inflation will continue to go down, which will help real income. So fast wage growth will help consumption, real incomes will recover.
The Paris-based organization hiked its outlook for the UK economy amid high wage growth. As for the Eurozone, the 20-nation bloc's growth forecast is projected to nearly double next year. U.S. growth is expected to slow from this year into 2025.
The United States was not as affected by the energy crisis as Europe was, but also there's some issues that we think, the structural issues that continue to make the United States a more dynamic economy. Consumption has been a lot stronger in the United States, investment stronger too, and so that is reflected on the growth rates in the United States vis-a-vis Europe.
As for the world's second biggest economy, the OECD is seeing a slowing from this year into next, as government stimulus spending in China is offset by flagging consumer demand and a real estate rut. OECD chief economist Alvaro Pereira also addressed the rising tension and disruption in the Red Sea.
We've seen an increase in shipping costs all over the world, and in fact, longer routes, but also an increase in shipping costs. Shipping costs went up by 160% in many routes. So we're talking about that. Obviously, that is has an impact on trade and has an impact also on prices.
Now, also happening is trade unions and Volkswagen company executives kicking off landmark pay talks today. They're likely to decide how aggressively Europe's biggest automaker pursues layoffs and possible factory closures in Germany. Here's more.
Trade unions and Volkswagen company executives kick off landmark pay talks Wednesday. It's likely to decide how aggressively Europe's biggest automaker pursues layoffs and possible factory closures in Germany. Tensions are running high as VW has threatened to close plants in the country for the first time. That's put it at odds with the key IG Metall union, which has vowed to fight any such moves. The union must also negotiate new labour deals for the core VW brand's 130,000 workers in Germany. Earlier this month, the automaker ended agreements that had safeguarded employment at 6 of its plants there since the mid-90s. VW argues high energy and labour costs in Germany make it harder to compete with European peers. It's also warned Chinese rivals want to grab a big chunk of the region's electric vehicle market. The VW brand's personnel chief said the division must cut costs to stay competitive. He called the firm's situation serious and said labour and management must work together on restructuring. Other German automakers feel the pain too. BMW and Mercedes-Benz both cut their profit forecasts in recent weeks due to weak demand in China.
Next, Amazon's recent and stern return to the office mandate may have shaken up remote and hybrid workers at other companies. The online retailer announced last week that employees must be in the office 5 days a week starting in January. But the tech giant's move doesn't necessarily signal an end to work flexibility. Such a stringent command could just be a cheap way for an employer to cut staff. People voluntarily leaving means not having to pay severance packages. Numbers suggest work flexibility is still common practice. A Gallup survey found in May that more than 50% of full-time employees with remote options had a hybrid schedule. And a federal judge has ruled that a New York City law mandating food delivery companies to share customer data with restaurants is unconstitutional. Yesterday's decision was a win for DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats. Now, according to the ruling, the law violated the First Amendment by improperly regulating commercial speech. New York City adopted the law in the summer of 2021 to help restaurants recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Delivery companies were required to provide restaurants with customers' names, delivery addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, and orders as well. The companies argued that the law violated the privacy rights of customers and threatened their data security. The New York City Hospitality Alliance said the judge's decision hurts small businesses and consumers. Now, bad news, egg prices spiking yet again. They jumped by more than 28% in August compared to just 12 months ago. That's easily the biggest increase out of any food item tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the main cause for egg rising is familiar to some of you, and that is bird flu. Birds getting sick, meaning fewer eggs, so less supply and thus higher prices at the grocery store. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says bird flu has impacted nearly 101 million birds across 48 states since January 2022. So maybe that helps explain why total egg production in July fell 2.6% year over year. Now, for some, the holiday shopping season has already begun this year. Many are expected to use third-party buy now, pay later services. In fact, Adobe Analytics projects U.S. shoppers will spend a record $18.5 billion using the services. This will be for holiday purchases in the last quarter of the year. And that means companies like Klarna, for example, Afterpay, and Affirm are set to take market share from debit cards and other payment options. Experts warn that shoppers could be careful, and they should be careful when paying off their buy now, pay later purchases with credit cards. They could put themselves at risk of a potential debt cycle. And Oscar-winning filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola is back with a star-studded fable tying together the past, present, and future. Let's take a look.
When does an empire die? Does it collapse in one terrible moment? No. But there comes a time when its people no longer believe in it.
Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis shows a society at a breaking point or a turning point.
And when we ask these questions, when there's a dialogue about them, that basically is a utopia. For Francis, at this point in his life, to be making a film about the future as a utopia is, that he has such faith in humanity to kind of solve our problems.
For Coppola, one kind of utopia is collaboration.
When you make a film, you're not just telling people what to do, you're inviting them to collaborate together with you, and even the actors collaborate on other aspects of the film.
I just think it was always about asking questions and, just keeping that open dialogue.
My plan is a city that people can dream about.
Megalopolis.
What about those standing in your way? You like it the way it is.
He's in a very delicate position, trying to figure out how to move forward, help the people, yet still hold on to a relationship with his daughter and his wife, and to preserve what he thinks is the way it should be done.
Coppola sees a parallel between the rulers of Megalopolis and today's political leaders.
Their job is to make a world good for the people, and yet they're more concerned of who's powerful and who's not powerful. And we are in danger of losing our republic the same way Rome was.
Is this society, is this way we're living, the only one that's available to us?
And quickly onto markets. Mixed day on Wall Street today after new record highs over the past few days. Dow Jones is down 0.7%, S&P is down 0.2%, but the Nasdaq ended in the green today, although it was pretty much flat. Nvidia up 2% today. And with that, all the stories in today's Business Matters. Back to you guys. What do you think?
Thanks, Don. Those egg prices are concerning, certainly a household staple for most families.
Yeah, extremely concerning. In fact, people shelling out their savings just to buy breakfast. But what can we do, right? It's due to the bird flu. Nothing we can do about that. Maybe just to hope that eggflation unscrambles itself.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Don. Well, Carrie, I did hear you mention that you've seen some of your neighbors buying chickens.
That's true, or heading over to the farmer's market, so there are some other options for sure. So.
Hey, maybe buying chickens is the right move right now.
Indeed.
Yep.